Well, good morning. I'm back up so soon. My name is George, and I am one of the pastors here. And David Perez, our pastor's taking a weekend off. So you guys are stuck with me, and I'm glad to be with you. So I hope you're glad to be with me. But what I would love to do this morning is I want to celebrate God's love. David's been in this series of words. And so I have a word for you this morning. But essentially, I just have some brief comments about these words, really just two things for us to think about. One is to actually open our hearts to what God's true disposition toward us is, and for all of us to really hope that, could that really be possible? Could he really feel that way toward us? But then secondly, if we really open our hearts to that, then what does that mean for us and what we share with the world around us? So just a few brief comments, a few brief comments. And then I want to, I'm going to show you the thing that I'm celebrating the most right now and what is showing me this word. So that sound like a plan? All right, you guys ready to go? Good. Okay, now I got 12 people with me. So 12 of us are going to go somewhere and the rest of you could just follow along. But here is the word. And then we're going to celebrate communion together. This word is kenosis. Everyone say that together. Kenosis. Go ahead. Beautiful, beautiful word. And it comes out of this text in Philippians. So I want to read this to you, and then I'll show you exactly where it's at. But it says this. And by the way, they call this was a hymn. They think that this was actually sung. And the writer of this, they believe, is Paul. And he's actually writing this from prison, but they call this the Epistle of Joy. So get that. That's just unbelievable. So being written from prison, but yeah, expresses this celebration and this joyfulness. But he writes this: "May my joy be complete by being of single mind, one in love, one in heart, and one in mind. Nothing is to be done out of jealousy or selfish ambition. Instead, out of humility of mind, everyone should give preference to others. Everyone pursuing not selfish interest, but those of others." And then it goes on to say this, and this gives us our word today. Make your own the mind of Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God did not count equality with God something to be grasped, but he emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, becoming as human beings are, and being in every way like a human being, he was humbler yet, even to accepting death, and death on a cross. So this word kenosis, which maybe for some of us sounds like a skin disease, it's far more beautiful than that. But it's right here. It's where it says Jesus emptied himself. Emptied is this word kenosis. And I find this word unbelievably meaningful to me. And I'm finding all these different ways that God is being present through understanding this, but also how I can participate with God in it. So it's this. Kenosis is this. It's a self-emptying. It's a self-giving. It's a self-sacrificing. And it's the very nature of love, which is always outpouring. I want you, all of us, to just go here. And can God actually be as loving as we hope he is? I think he is. And I think this word actually is an affirmation of that. If you go to the next slide, maybe you can say like this: God is as humble, giving, and loving as we hope God to be. So, for some of us, that's hard. For some of us, perhaps the kind of religion that we got or the God that was shared with us wasn't quite that. But yet, we're learning all kinds of things as we grow in this understanding of what it means to be human, what it means to live in this world and in a universe that really, the essence of it actually has its beginning and its start in this divine love. But I pray that your heart can actually open up to that. Could God be more loving than you could ever imagine? And could he be as loving as you hope he would be? Well, I actually am experiencing that the more that I open up to that, the more that I become like that in my life. And I'm not the only person. Theologians aren't the only people saying that neuroscience and neuropsychology and the ways we're understanding the way the brain works today, it's teaching us that the most healthy way to live is to live in a world that would actually understand kenosis, that would actually believe that there's not this punitive being that's just waiting to strike everybody down and to catch them in some kind of wrong, but there's a being that his source comes out of this overflowing outpouring of love, and the most transformative thing that leads to thriving and health and wholeness and the kind of world that we all desire is that the starting point is perhaps we could actually believe that the source that gave us life really is this kenosis. So, is God in your mind, in your heart, as humble and as giving and as loving as you hope he would be? I hope he is. Well, the second part of this is that if that is our image of God, then we have an opportunity to participate with God. So the very nature of being more fully human is to be humble, giving, and loving like God. See, that's what incarnation shows us. When God comes and he finds it that it's more than okay to be human and shows us what being human actually looks like, that's what Jesus teaches us. Jesus doesn't teach us what it looks like to go to some other place and float around on clouds like angels. That was always my image of heaven when I was a kid, and it just seemed so remote and so disconnected from what I was experiencing every day. It's like, really, is that what I want to do? Is I want to float around on these white clouds in a white, robe? And no. This incarnation, this kenosis that comes to this earth, it shows that it's okay to be human. And here's what it looks like when human beings thrive in what God intended us to thrive in. So if we're going to believe in and open our hearts to that kind of God, that a God of kenosis is just this endless outpouring of love, then my gosh, we have to become people that are an outpouring of that also. Now the truth is that we've all had different kinds of upbringing, and we've been influenced and impacted and affected by perhaps what was given to us. So I get it. For some of us, the world's been very harsh, and maybe it's really hard to believe that people, let alone a God, could be that loving. But one of the things that I'm growing in the most, and what this word teaches me, is that the lack of love or the presence of love transforms everything else in our lives. And so I like the transforming that's going on when love is overflowing. I like the person that I'm becoming. I like the experience of what it feels like to be human when I'm sharing that and when I'm receiving that. So kenosis is simply this. This is outpouring of God's love, and it is freely flowing. And there's not one of us in this room that it's not flowing to. And there's not one of us in this room that our hearts opening up to that love couldn't be entirely transformed. It couldn't lead to a better thriving, a more wholeness, a better way of being, and I would argue a better world. If we really believed it and we really were willing to share it and give it away like Jesus shows us it can be given away, it changes everything. Now, what I'm also learning is that 25 years ago, neuroscience and neuropsychology and philosophy was teaching us that what is deepest in every human being is self-centered and greedy, and even a lot of our theology was teaching that at the deepest place of who we are, it's against God. That's not been my experience in life. My own experience, and I think lots of people's experience, has been what is deepest in every human being is of God. And so there's new neuropsychology and new neuroscience that is teaching us a whole new way of being human and affirming that, no, what is deepest in us. Now, this isn't just the Bible saying this, but these are brilliant people telling us when they wire people up and they see how the brain works, that what is really deepest in us is selfless, unconditional love. And this kenosis is something that shows us that and invites us to participate in that and invites us to take a step toward it, that it really could be possible. And so we're living in a day when we really can believe that. It's not, too far out there for us to believe that what is deep. Now, are there horrible things that are going on in the world? Are there superficial characteristics that human beings give themselves to that don't look anything like that? Absolutely. And that needs to be confronted and it needs to be dealt with. But I still believe that what is deepest in every human being is of God. And perhaps we just need to see it and believe it for ourselves. So the science is there. The scriptures, the writers, and the prophets in the Old Testament keep saying this is what it means to represent God. This is what it means to move our world to a better place. You just have to trust in it. So now we got the latest technology, the latest science is beginning to sound a whole lot like Hebrew prophets, and there's this merging of faith and science, and what a great time to be alive, because we don't just have to blindly have faith in something that isn't being affirmed in other parts of the world that we live in other ways. So I will say this, though. They did a study a while back, and they found the single most narcissistic group in the United States were clergy. Wow, that's people in my job. That really, really struck me hard. That people like me who, I don't claim to speak for God, but there are people who actually claim to speak for God. And that somehow, because they think they speak for God, they're special and they're different than everyone else. And, everyone just needs to go look how special they are. That they tend, clergy can be the most narcissistic groups in the world that we live in today. And I don't know what your experience has been. I know none of us want to represent that here. All of our lives are on a different trajectory. But if you have experienced that in some way, I am so sorry. And I got to be honest, my own life in understanding what this kenosis is has had to move in a particular direction. When I was a little boy and at 10, and I was like, I want to pastor people. I remember seeing the priest at a Catholic church, and I was just fascinated by him working with all the elements, and I was like, I want to do that. But I remember when I went to my pastor and told him that, like, he brought me up in front of the church and made a big deal out of it. But yet, the people that were, going to be doctors or lawyers or teachers, they tend to have like a secondary kind of calling. One of the things that I've learned in life, the highest calling is just for you to be how you're wired to be. That all of us have a high calling, and it's just us living up to what has been given to us, and even open our understanding to the outpouring of love that has been given us that we have yet to know and experience, like through these elements and through this kenosis that we see in Jesus, that all of us have a high calling. So we probably need to change. There's many of you that probably could be up here speaking for this even more powerfully and more meaningfully than me. But we're all in this together, and we all have a job to do. But I apologize for being a part of a group that is one of the most narcissistic groups in our culture. Shame of us. Those of us who claim to represent God should be modeling kenosis, this self-giving, this endless self-sacrifice and of loving. And I'm thankful to work with a bunch of pastors and people here that really, really desire that. So I hope that you experience that. But a couple of things, and then we're going to receive communion this morning. That they're discovering that in our cerebral cortex, there are these two parts to it. There's the right hemisphere, and there's the left hemisphere. And the right hemisphere is this part that's very present in the moment. And the left hemisphere is this part that tends to focus on the past and is always worried about the future. And one of the things that we're learning is that we're way too left brain. Isn't that true? It's always we're obsessing over what has just happened, and or we're worrying about what is going to happen, and all along the way we're missing this moment of just being fully present. One of the things that Kenosis teaches us is that God wasn't too busy, ordering the universe to actually be here with us right now. One of the most beautiful things of this word is that I don't have to think that God is somewhere else. The action's happening right here, where you and I find ourselves every day, and right in here. That's where the action's happening. And so God is not somewhere in the past or somewhere in the future. He's right with us. We just sung that Emmanuel, God is with us, Jesus. For us here to really understand this word, we really have to work on being a little more right-brained. And I'll tell you how this plays out for me. And this is leading to what is the most beautiful thing that I'm celebrating today about God's love. Because on one side, there is this negativity that comes into our lives. There's this fearfulness. There's this hatefulness. And what we're learning is the mind attaches to that like Velcro. And it's like instant imprint. Hatefulness, fearfulness, all these things that are not good for human beings. Not only do the scriptures teach us that, but neuroscience and psychology and philosophy, we're being taught in so many different ways. That's not healthy. That's not leading us the right way. That doesn't lead to human thriving. But then on the other side, that positivity and things like love and joy and gratitude and happiness, these things don't imprint so quickly. Now, why are we made like that? I don't know. Why do we so quickly gravitate toward the things that are destructive to our hearts and our minds? I can't answer that this morning. But what we do know is that if we're going to live out of maybe a little more out of the right side of our brains and be a little more present, that if we'll take 15 seconds in moments to be grateful, to experience love, to experience forgiveness, to think about what really makes us happy, if we will pause in those moments and be present in them, that they do imprint. But the truth is we're too quickly going to our left brain, and what we're doing is we're missing out on the thing that really gives us life and joy and meaning. And so what is a moment like this when we celebrate this together? One, it reminds us that we're all in this together. That we all need each other, that none of us is to be excluded, or none of us is unnecessary. We need one another. But secondly, we're being reminded that there really is something more beautiful and good and life-giving. And if we could just pause in that for a moment, it could become a light. It could become electricity. It could guide and open our hearts and our lives to so many more beautiful and life-giving things. So that's what this moment is about. It's a moment of being reminded just how loved you really are. And secondly, just how loving you could become, that actually leads to the transformation of the world that we live in. And that world doesn't start somewhere in the Middle East. That world starts in your home. That world starts where you come in contact with all kinds of people every day. That's how the world changes, through love and us actually being fully present in it every day. So what's transforming me? I'm going to show you a picture, and here it is. It is this little 2-month-old baby girl. By the way, I don't know why I've had so many girls in my family. I've heard someone told me, well, God looked down and said, George, that's all the man that is needed in your household, so I'm just going to give you all girls. I don't think that's true. But yeah, this little 2-month-old has been transforming me in ways that I can only imagine, and I have yet to fully realize. But I know at a deeper level something is happening, and I'm trying to be more present in the moment. Now, I, just like you, have resentment. I have things that have hurt me. I have tendencies to want to act in hate or to want to act in vengeance, and they imprint on my brain just as quickly and just as solidly as they do on yours. But I'm finding the way to undo that is from moments like this. So she's actually here. So how about if I just bring her up live? By the way, this is my daughter Carrington, my oldest, and this is my little Kenosis in the form of Aurora Noel. What do you think of those bright lights, huh? Yeah. She was being really bad yesterday. We're Ohio State Buckeye fans, and she had a T-shirt on yesterday that said, "I got a Michigan in my diaper." And I was kind of chuckling, but I go, "That's not the kind of people we really want to be." But yeah. And by the way, I mean this sincerely. I'm not just looking for an opportunity to show off this beautiful gift of kenosis and love in my life. But this is teaching me something about self-emptying. It's teaching me something about all the resentments, all the disappointments. Yeah, I'm not going to ignore those things, and neither should you. But no matter what it is that or where we find ourselves or what we find ourselves going through, each of us have been given gifts and opportunities for the presence of love, the spiritual qualities that really make us alive and really make us human in the way God made us. They're happening all around us, and they're the things that are more out of the right brain. So we just need to pause more often. And so, yeah, I'm trying to do that. And sometimes I'll just sit and look into the eyes of this beautiful gift, and honestly, I feel like I'm experiencing heaven, and I'm experiencing pure love. And so I don't ignore that. I go, God, you're present in this, and somehow that changes everything. So this is my example of kenosis, and this is another example of kenosis right here, Carrington, my oldest. So what I want to invite you to do, thank you so much, Carrington. Perhaps as you come forward this morning, what if you just paused? And what if you opened your heart to what can I be grateful for? What things am I perhaps not being fully present to in the moment that could be allowing me to be missing everything? And what if you really, really believe that God could be as giving, self-sacrificing, as loving as you hope that he would be? What if you became what you hope the person next to you would become and would be as generous and loving and self-sacrificing, giving, and caring just as much about you as you do yourself? Because we want that from others. But what if that love was such a free outpouring to all of us that we actually became that? What could that lead to? I think it could lead to something that we would all celebrate a whole lot more. And that's the invitation this morning. So I just want to pray, and I'm going to invite you to come forward, and Lionel and the band's going to come out, and they're going to lead us in some songs. And I don't know if you've been connecting all this, but the songs we're singing every week are centering us in this. And I'm so grateful for Lionel and this team that's putting the right words on our lips to get in our hearts that really does lead to the kind of transformation that we all need. So we're not playing games here. We're really trying to align our hearts and tune our hearts to this thing that makes us all alive in ways that we all need to be more alive. So here's what we're going to do. If you're on the outside over here, we're going to ask you to go to the wall and come down and receive the elements that remind us of kenosis, that we really are loved. If you're on this side, you'll go to the wall over there. If you're here in the center, you'll just come out and go clockwise. So you guys will go to your left and return to your seats on the right. And guess what? It's okay if we bump into people along the way, because that's what this is about. If we can't do that, then we might be missing the whole point. And do this. If there's somebody around you that's unable, that's in a wheelchair or something like that, perhaps you could offer to take that back to them. At last service, there was a couple people in wheelchairs and they couldn't get up. So pay attention to what's going on around you. Maybe you could be helpful. And then as you receive them, you go back to your seats. You just take those. Make this a moment to pause and allow the right side of that brain to go somewhere good and really transform you. And then Lionel will lead us in some singing. Okay, but let's pray, and then we'll come forward and receive. So if the servers want to come on up. God, thank you for really being as loving, as giving, as generous, and as good as we all hope you to be. For some of us, that's a harder notion to really trust in. And so for some of us, we need help. We need to bump up against people who perhaps understand this word kenosis, and they're an extension. They're the exclamation point on the outpouring of that love into our lives. So whatever it is that we need, would you open our hearts to it? God, would you help us to see the places of fearfulness, of hatred, of resentment, the things that are just, they're destructive, and we need freedom from them. But God, that freedom comes through your love. Love is the safest, the most transforming place for us to find freedom in those things. So we need a touch of your love to touch our hearts. So God, would you be present even through this juice and this bread? But God, would you also be present through one another, that we could see kindness and goodness and joy and generosity and love through others, that really could give us the hope that we need to fully trust in this more. But God, we belong to you, and may your love find our hearts, and may we share it endlessly with the world, the part of the world that we live in every day. We give you thanks.